This tutorial shows you how to create a Jasper report from an XML file data source. This XML file contains a repeating element contact, and there are sub-elements of contact: first name, last name, email, and contact ID that'll make up the fields in a Jasper report. To start with this report, I'll create a data source. Data source will be based on an XML file data source. I'll call that and it's probably most convenient to use this option here. Once you specify the XML file, you'll be specifying a root XPath. This will allow the report to define the XPath that I'll be using. Test it, that's fine, and save. So there's a data source created much in the same way you'd create any Excel or RDBMS data source. Create a new report. Okay, the data source is configured, and now we're going to next configure the query. In the same way we create a mapping of fields coming out of the SQL query, we'll create a mapping of fields coming out of the XML data source. And we use the query language XPath to do that. You can see over here from the file the structure. I take the loop element or the repeating group and make that my record node, and all the nodes are highlighted. And then for each of these, I can either drag it or I can use this add node as field. This will give me a relative path to use for everything. And that's set. Now that the data source is created, these fields that are XPath based, they are just like any other fields that you have in Jasper. And I can drag them onto a detail page. I'll remove a few of the extra bands that won't be part of this report. And I've got my column header band. And I'm going to add a few static text elements for the report. At this point, there's nothing really specific that we're doing for XML. There's some simple report writing. Default types are also used with XML, so you can, using the properties window, correct any type problems that you have. And I'll line my columns up and then space the bands out a little bit better. I'll do a real quick bolding of the header. Some very basic formatting. And then I preview. Now the report's compiling, and again, this is based on an XML data source. Now some applications of this is sometimes you're in an environment where you don't have an RDBMS handy, and you can see that these rows have come in and they correspond with the XML document. Some Gmail address and MSN address. Same thing here. So for operational purposes, you might send out a report of an XML file. With XPath, you can condense and you can filter, and so you can see a reduced amount of information. This might be a good candidate to go over a file and look for example, an error element or something of that nature. So if you've got an XML file, you can use Jasper to render that in PDF in something that's quite a bit more human readable. Send that out in an email instead of your XML, and your users may find that's easier to work with.